Well, hello everyone and welcome back to the Econobox garage. Over the past couple of videos, I've got the steering rack, steering column, and dampers installed. And in this episode, I'm going to get the rest of the front suspension put in. So thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy this week's video. In the previous video, I got the steering column reinstalled, the steering rack permanently mounted in place, and the dampers cleaned up and installed in their proper position. So next up is to mate the lower control arms and spindle assembly with the car and get everything set up for that. Now, one of the first things I'm going to do is get the tie rod ends in the proper position relative to the steering arm. So I know that these have to point up. So what I'll do is I'm going to loosen this clamp off here so that I can spin the entire tie rod end. I could do it without loosening that, but what happens when you turn this to go up? It distorts the boot here. So I don't want to do that. So I'll loosen these clamps off, and I'll do the same on the other side because we have the same situation there. Right, so this is the trunnion bolt, and it's the one that goes through. So it goes through there and into the end of the lever shock. So that goes in through there. And then you'll see this little notch here. That notch needs to line up with that hole. So I'll just put that in there so that this bolt can go in. Let's try and get that lined up. There we go. So now I can get that bolt in, and that holds the trunnion bolt from going in and outside or front to back, and also clamps it in place. There's a little split on the top of the control or the lever arm here, and that just clamps everything together that way. Now in a previous video I talked about the poly bushes that I've got. So I've got some lube that came with the bushes, so I'll put some on the inside of that when I put it in, and also on the bolt itself, so the whole thing is lubricated up. Now to help with putting this all together, this is kind of heavy to hold up and with one hand and put bolts in with the other. So I just got a milk crate here with a piece of OSB on top and an old jack stand, and I'll put the A-arm so that the spring pad or spring or the part where the spring itself sits, I'll set that over top of this to help hold it into place while I put in the necessary bolts and stuff. Now I also have the bushes for the A-arm as well as for the trunnion, so I'll just do the same on that. Now I have cleaned everything up. There's the other trunnion bolt, the A-arm bolts, and the springs have been cleaned up and given a coat of rust paint. So these are the A-arm bolts, and you'll notice where they go that there's a big hole on one side, and I don't know if you can see it on the other side there, but there's just where my finger is up in here, there's a smaller hole. Now one of the washers on the bolt has an extra piece welded onto it from the factory, and that space there fits into that hole there. So that's how that works. So it's pretty hard to mess that one up, I think. So just be sure that when you're putting this together, you don't get worried about there being a big hole there and only a little bolt going through it. So this will actually come in from the other side. There we go. Through the bushing, and then through there, and then this one goes on top of that. the slots on both sides for the tabs for those. And these are a Nylox type nut, so there's no need for lock washers and what have you. So let's get to work on putting this whole thing in. So here we have everything bolted into place, except for the spring. So the trunnion bolt has a new cotter pin in it. The tie rod has a new cotter pin. The Nylox self-locking nuts are tight on each of those. And it's starting to look like a car again. And I've got the brake line hooked up. Now that that side's done, I just have to go and do the same on the other side. Now I was going to put the springs in, but then I remembered I've ordered replacement bump stops. There was one missing on one side, and I only had the one, so I figured I'd replace them both. So those have to go in before the springs go in, because they go up in here. So that's going to do it for this episode. In a video I posted a couple of weeks ago, I refilled the dampers for the front here. Now a couple of commenters mentioned that I may have overfilled them, and gave me a way of figuring out if that is the case. So I'm going to put the suspension as if the car was sitting on the ground. So the tie rod end's about level, and the arm on the damper is about level. So I'll jack that up to there. So once I've got that in position, I'll remove this plug and see where the fluid level is in here. Now from what I gathered from those comments is if this is too full, when the damper is operating, it will blow seals and gaskets and what have you. This is more like a little expansion chamber. So rather than have that happen, I'll take the necessary precautions to avoid that now. There I have the suspension in close to what I think is normal ride height. I just put a rag around here. If it is overfilled, I'll have something to catch whatever fluid comes out. So let's get that plug out and see where we're at. Well, it's a bit of a challenge to see, but it looks like I've got the fluid level right where it needs to be. It's right at the bottom of the threads here, so just a little bit came out. I'll put this one back together and repeat the process for the other side. Well, I've done the same on the other side of the car. Pulled the plug out, and this one was a little bit over full, so I'm just going to let that drain out for a couple of minutes, and then I'll put the plug back in, and we're going to call that good to go. That's going to do it for this episode. So if you enjoyed the video, please share it with your friends, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget that little bell icon so you'll get notified when the next video comes out. My name is Ian, this is the Econobox Garage. We'll see you next time.